Hi, my name is DROdio. I'm the owner of DROdio Real Estate. I'm going to show you today a little mortgage trick that I've titled How to Live in a Bigger Property and Pay the Same Monthly Mortgage. So if you want to learn how to do that, let's get started. Let me first, before I take you to the spreadsheet, just show you a couple things on our site that you should know. Our site is DROdio.com, which is DROdio.com. We have a Q&A section here, and there are a lot of questions from buyers, all the questions that you're afraid to ask here, all about financing and home loans, testimonials, negotiation techniques, seller Q&A, all the questions you're afraid to ask again as a seller. So definitely utilize this resource. This is compiled from all the questions that buyers have asked us over the years that we've been in business, and we put all the answers right here for you so you don't have to go through the same questions and tribulations that they went through. But specifically today, let's figure out how to be able to live in a bigger property and pay the same monthly mortgage. So we have an FAQ that I want to show you a couple things about. So should I pay interest is a good keyword to find it, and here it is. Should I pay principal and interest or just interest? Right there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and a lot of what I'm telling you is going to be in this FAQ, but instead of you having to read it, you can just sit back and relax, and I'll walk you through everything. The idea behind what we're about to do is as follows. There is a loan type that I really like, and it's a 30-year fixed loan, but the first 10 years of the loan are interest only, meaning that for the first 10 years of the life of the loan, you don't pay down any of the principal balance of the loan. Let me show you what I mean with the spreadsheet. I'm going to give you two scenarios, okay? In scenario one, we have a buyer who's paying principal and interest. This is a traditional buyer. They're just going to live in the house and pay it down and go on their way. But in scenario two, we have a buyer who's just paying interest, meaning they're not going to pay down the principal balance of the loan. They're only going to pay the interest that accrues on the loan. And by the way, we have a lot of FAQs that you can look at that talk about the tax benefits of buying and that sort of thing. So that's not for this discussion, but there are answers there for you to see. Okay, a couple assumptions. First of all, let's assume that under scenario one, the purchase price is $300,000, and the buyer is going to put 20% of their own money into it, or $60,000, and they're going to finance the rest. So the loan amount will be $240,000, which is just the difference between 300 minus 60 is 240. We're also going to assume that the interest rate on the loan is 6.5%, and we're going to assume that the appreciation is 7.66%. Now, how did I get that number? Glad you asked. Let me show you. There is a website run by the government. It's OFEO, O-F as in Frank, H-E-O.gov. It's the Office of Federal Housing Enterprise Oversight, and on this site they track home prices. So I have gone down here to MSAs, which are just the metropolitan areas, and I've chosen Washington, D.C., and I've hit search. And we can see here that it's going to show us the annual percent change in the MSA house price index through 2007 quarter one. By the time you look at it, there may be more quarters in here. So from 76, when they started actually keeping track of the numbers, all the way down through 2007. And you can see there are some years where the numbers were flat or negative. In 1990, it was a little negative, and into 95, and then it started getting very positive, and for a while it was extremely positive. Look at this number, 24% annualized appreciation reported in the third quarter of 2004. 24% here, 26% here in 2005. And as we can see, those numbers have been going way down, and now we're down to a flat market for a little while. But I went through the liberty here of averaging all these numbers out. So here are those exact same numbers starting in 1976 And this second column here is the quarter, and this is the appreciation or devaluation. And as you can see, the average is 7.66% for all those numbers. So that's the number that we're going to use. So assuming that number, and assuming these numbers here, the monthly payment for this buyer is going to be $1,500 a month. So by paying $1,500 a month, they can afford a $300,000 house. So the question becomes, if you're only paying the interest and not the principal, how much house can you afford by paying the same amount per month? Well, I'll tell you. I did some calculations to find that to pay almost exactly the same amount monthly, 15, 18, 20 versus 15, 16, 90, you can buy a $343,000 house. So you can buy $43,750 more house with the same monthly payment by just paying the interest on the loan instead of paying down the principal. Now, to put 20% down, you have to put a little more of your own cash in because you're putting $60,000 of cash in here and you're putting $68,750 in here. You don't have to put in this last $8,750. You could get a second trust for it. It would be a little difficult because that would be a very small second trust, but the idea stands. I mean, if you didn't want to put your own cash in, there's ways to not have to. But let's assume that you do in this scenario. So really, even though you're buying a $43,000 larger house, you're putting a little bit more of your own money in. But you're still getting a lot more house than you would under this scenario. Okay, your loan is bigger because the house costs more, and you pay a little bit of a premium for the privilege of only having to pay interest, 6.625% instead of 6.5. But your monthly payment is just about the same. So how do these numbers work out? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's take a look. S1 stands for scenario 1. Remember, scenario 1 is where they're paying principal and interest. And S2 stands for scenario 2, where they're just paying interest. So in scenario 1, in year 0, the balance due is $240,000, which, as we saw up here, was just the initial amount of the loan. And the value of the house is $300,000, as we saw here. That was the purchase price. And in scenario 2, the value is $343,000, and the balance due, it's a larger loan, it's $275,000. All right, so let's follow this through the years. You can see here in years 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., the amount of the loan doesn't change in scenario 2. That's what we're doing. We're keeping that loan the same. For the first 10 years, you're only paying interest on the loan. You're not paying down any principal. In scenario 1, you are paying down principal. You can see it's not a heck of a lot, but it does add up, and it kind of snowballs. The longer you go, the more principal you start paying down. In the beginning, it's very little. For example, between year 1 and year 2, you're paying less than $3,000 of principal, but let's say between year, let me scoot this over a little bit here, between year 9 and year 10, you're paying closer to, not quite 5,000, but 4,600 or so. So, as you can see here in scenario 2, the loan stays the same for the first 10 years. In scenario 1, the amount due goes down. But here's the kicker. Since you bought a more expensive property, it's worth more because the property compounds. So at the end of 10 years, at a 7.66% appreciation, this first property is worth $627,000. You paid $300,000 for it. Now, you might think it's ridiculous that in 10 years a property could double in price, but let me tell you, don't forget that 30 years ago houses were selling for $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000, and now they're selling for $500,000 and $600,000. So it's absolutely reasonable to say that in 10 years at a 7.6% annualized appreciation, the house could be worth $627,000. The larger house that you bought at $343,750 is worth even more. It's worth, in fact, almost $100,000 more. Let's say $90,000, not quite, or I guess it's a little more than $90,000 more. I apologize, it's a little less than $90,000 more. Okay, but at any rate, it's worth more. That's what matters here. So let's do some numbers, because even though the property is worth more, you also owe more on the property because you haven't paid down the interest. So let's figure out exactly how things shake out. What I'm about to show you, based on this one decision that you might make from this video, could be the difference between you making or not making $11,000 in this example. So this one decision that you might make based on this video in this example could net you at closing $11,000 more dollars. Here's how we came up with that number. In scenario 1, the property is worth $627,000, but you need to take out of that the $60,000 that you originally put in, because that's not really a gain. You put in that $60,000 originally, and you have to take it back out now to really calculate the gain. You also have to take out the balance that's due on the property, because you haven't paid down the loan completely. So you still owe $203,463.24 on this property. That money goes back to the bank. So your true gain here is $364,000 approximately in scenario 1. In scenario 2, the property is worth more. You also put in $68,750 of your own dollars, and you owe more. You owe $275,000, but still your gain is more. It's $11,000 more in this example. So this is now, I mean, and that's besides the benefit that you've had of living in a larger property. So that's really what I want to show you. Now, a lot of this is kind of presupposing that the property will appreciate, because if it doesn't appreciate by this much, let's say it only appreciates by 6% annually, then you can see that you start paying for the privilege of living in a larger property. You come out a little bit behind. So there are risks here. I mean, this is definitely a much more aggressive posture that you're in, where you're assuming a couple things. You're assuming that property is going to appreciate. If it doesn't appreciate as much or at all, then you're going to come out, you're not going to come out ahead. But if it follows the historical averages, you will. So a lot of it depends on your risk tolerance. Some people, if you can't sleep at night because you're doing this type of riskier thing, I'll go back to 7.66 here, and also here. If you can't sleep at night because of this, then you shouldn't be doing it. But if you're just looking at it from a logical perspective, making this decision and making some assumptions which are consistent with the historical averages, means that you should break even or come out ahead by making that choice. And you get a bigger place to live in. Okay, let's say that you want to do this little exercise on your own. Let me give you a couple tools. Back on this FAQ that I showed you, should I pay principal and interest or just interest? At the bottom, there is a compound interest calculator. There's also an amortization tool. So if you want to see how much a $500,000 property is going to be worth in 10 years, you would use this compound interest calculator. And if you want to see how much you're going to owe on a loan after 10 years, you would use this amortization tool. And I'll just show you, for example, here, this is the amortization tool that pops up when you click on that link. You can see here that on a $240,000 loan, which was in scenario 1, the monthly payment is $1,516 per month at a 6.5% rate over 360 months, which is the same thing as saying 30 years. There's a report that you can view that will show you how it all works out. So in in month 1 or month 0 when you buy the property, the loan balance is $240,000. In month 12, which is year 1, we can see that the balance is $237,000. And so on, all the way down to finally in year 30, your balance becomes 0. And what's interesting is you can see that in year 30, you're paying mostly principal. You're paying $1,500 of principal and only $8 in interest in year 30. Whereas contrast that to month number 1. In month number 1, you're paying only $216 of principal and $1,300 of interest. So as you can see, these numbers flip. The principal gets bigger and the interest gets smaller over time. And that's just a function of the way that loan amortizations work. So hope you enjoy this newfound knowledge on this loan type. It is a loan type that I really like, because most people aren't going to live in their property for 30 years. So if you're only going to live there for 5 or 10 years, this can be a way to get into a bigger property with the same monthly payment. In terms of some tools that you may find useful, we have a number of mortgage calculators that are available on the DROdio.com/buyers page. And this is point number 1, learn how much you can afford. But then also, I highly recommend that you speak to some of the loan officers that we work with. We have a section called Our Trusted Lending Partners, and some of the lenders that we work with are outlined here. So go through these steps, do your research, read all these Q&A sections, and then call us with questions. We're here to help whenever you need us. Our toll-free number is 1-877-437-6346. Again, this is DROdio. I'm the owner of the company, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.